Well, it's hard to believe it's been 3 years since I put the PEX down and poured this concrete floor in the barn. And I finally got the system up and running. So I'll walk you through what I did here to set up my system and see if maybe it worked for you. And I'm not saying in any way that I'm an expert on this. This is the first time I've done this. But the system has been working great. It's been up and running for about 3 weeks now. And I could not be happier with the results. So let me walk you through each of these pieces and how the system operates, and we'll get a little closer look at it. Here you see my PEX tubing coming out of the floor. I have 3 loops. I have 1 loop in the wood shop, which is on the other side of this wall, and then 2 loops in the main area here behind me. So this area is 32 by 32. The wood shop is 16 by 32. So those are 300-foot loops of PEX, half-inch PEX tubing. And they were spaced approximately 18 inches apart. I was kind of hoping for 16 inches when I installed it, but I just didn't have enough without adding another loop. I was a little nervous that it might not work as well with that spacing, but as we go here, I'll explain why it's working pretty darn good. So anyways, here we come through the manifolds. So we have the return manifold here and the supply manifold below it. I got those manifolds at Menards. If I can find a link to Amazon or something, I'll do that too. I'll put it in the description. Otherwise, I'll put the links to Menards. But those are quite expensive. The manifolds themselves, I think for the set was $200. There was another $100 for these valves and these end pieces here. Tubing comes up, the return comes up through that valve and into the pump. Now the pump has isolation valves on either side if I need to replace it. And then it continues through a strainer. And then into the top of the tank. This is a 30-gallon power vent tank. And the temperature setting on it is set pretty low. I think my temperature coming out of the top of the tank is about 100 degrees when it's running. Oh, I have just a little bit of a drip. I have to fix that. These are compression fittings, so I can just tighten that up there. So I come out of the top of the tank. The supply has a temperature pressure gauge. We're just over 15 pounds there. It's sitting at 80 degrees right now. Hasn't ran in a while. Then I go through the air separator in the expansion tank. And then that piping comes down and back to the supply to the loops in the floor. So the fluid I put in is this freeze control propylene glycol from Granger. So I got it from Granger. That stuff's expensive. It's about almost $200 for a 5-gallon jug, and I put in 2 full jugs, and about half of that jug, that's all full strength. That's diluted from cycling the fluid through when I initially pumped all the fluid in. So that's diluted quite a bit, probably down to 30%. That was my goal, was to get a 30% mix. So another important thing I did is I changed out the relief valve that comes with the tank. This is like, I think it's 150 pounds maybe. But this one here is a 30 pounder. That's used for hydronic heating systems, because my system runs at about 14 to 16 pounds. So if we ever get too hot and over pressurized, that relief valve will kick off at 30 pounds. So I still have a little bit of piping to do. I'm going to pipe that down to my drain there and pipe that pan into the drain. So another thing I did was all that copper piping I fitted it together and soldered it on the bench, and then I flushed out each piece before I installed it, and that way I didn't have to flush the entire system. I used the air hose. I blew out every run of PEX, every loop, and obviously there was nothing in there that's been sealed up since I installed it, so that was good. But just to be sure, I blew air through each one, and then that way I didn't have to flush the entire system, because the water tank is clean, the PEX tubing was clean, and then all the soldering I did, each one of those pieces I flushed thoroughly out with the garden hose before I installed it. So the way that the controls work is I have this Taco relay, and it's connected to the thermostat on the other side of that wall in the wood shop. I can take you around and show you that. So when the thermostat calls for heat, it'll kick the relay on, which kicks the pump on. The pump is a 3-speed pump. It's set to low speed currently. The flow indicators down here when it's running are just below a gallon per minute. I'd say maybe 0.8 gallons per minute. So really that's the system itself is so simple that when the thermostat calls for heat, it kicks the pump on. The pump starts flowing through the water heater, and the water heater kicks on when it needs to. Right now that temperature in the water tank is sitting at about 100 degrees. So once the water starts flowing through, we start getting cooler water coming back. The water heater will kick on via its own thermostat, and then it runs for a while until it meets the demand of the thermostat on the other side of the wall, and it shuts it off. And then at that point, the pump stops running. The tank will continue to fire for a little while until it comes up to temperature, and then it'll shut off. So here is my thermostat. My set point is at 60 degrees. So you can see it's 59.9 in here. I think there's like a 1 degree dead band either side of the set point. So I don't think it kicks on till it drops to 59. And then it runs till 61. I haven't really watched it that close to see if that's for sure, but I think that's what it is. But as far as how it feels in here, well, let me get... So right now, let's see what the floor temp is. 65 degrees, 66. So the floor temp's, right around there, 65. And it just feels so nice in here. So at that set point of 60 degrees, for working out here, it's perfect. It actually might be even a little bit too warm. A lot of times I'll come out wearing like a Henley, and I get going, working on a project, and I usually take it off and work in my t-shirt. So I'm super happy with how warm it is in here. At 60 degrees in the house with forced air, you might feel a little chilly. But out here with everything in the shop is that same temperature, it just feels really comfortable. So sometimes we use the big part of the barn for, little get-togethers or something. We had some friends over a couple weeks ago, and I bumped it up to 62, and I asked everybody, how it felt, and everybody was happy with that temperature at 62, even the girls, who typically, not always, but typically are a little colder at lower temperatures. But everybody was comfortable, and so I think that's what I'll do is if we have a little get together, I can bump it up. Maybe the day before I'll hit the temperature up a little bit, just give it some time to get up there. But otherwise, I think 59, 60 degrees is plenty good for a shop. So that spacing I was worried about of 18 inches or so, not an issue. It's working really good. So as far as cost on this, like I said, that manifold is $200. The other stuff was $100. The pump's $100. The controllers, I forget what that was. I think it was close to $100 maybe.
Then you got the strainer, the air separator, the expansion tank, the valves, all that piping, you know, is another couple $100 probably. And then the power vent tank is, you know, almost $1,000. But I really wanted to go with the power vent so I could vent through my sidewall, so that 2-inch PVC goes up into the attic space and then over to the sidewall, instead of putting a penetration through my roof. So to see that initial setup with the PEX tubing and my 2-inch foam board and pouring the concrete out here in the barn, there'll be a card right here that you can click on to see that video.